You must wear big clothes to cover yourself.
Why?
The story of my body is written in cloth and silence. It began with the hiss of a sewing machine, a sound as constant in my childhood as prayer. My mother's hands, capable and weary, were the first architects of my concealment. Her theology was stitched into every seam. A new school skirt, bought from the market, would be laid upon the cutting table like a suspect. She would take up panels of dark, heavy fabric and attach them with meticulous care, transforming any hint of contour into a shapeless drape. "The world is full of wolves, NNEM," she would murmur, pins pressed between her lips. "What God has given you is a test. We must not make the brothers stumble." Her words were not unkind, but they were a decree. My shape was a problem to be solved, a divine oversight that required human correction. My father's approval was the final stitch. He would appear in the doorway, a tall silhouette of authority. His eyes, the color of dark earth, would perform a swift, guilty journey from my face, over the new landscape of my hips and chest that the fabric sought to deny, and then fix on a point on the wall. A grunt of assent, a mumbled verse about modesty, and he would retreat. His averted gaze was my first lesson. My body was something to be looked away from. Something that caused a good man discomfort. So, I learned to be a ghost in my own home. I learned to walk without the natural sway my spine desired, to fold my arms across my chest, to make my physical self as small and unnoticeable as possible within the tents of my clothes. But a body is not a secret you can keep. It whispers through fabric. It announces itself in a room. My crime, my big bum, was the family truth everyone pretended not to see. The silence broke on a hot, still night when I was 16. I had crept into the kitchen for water, the fridge light a stark blue island in the dark. His voice came from the shadows, and I jumped, my heart a trapped bird. He was sitting at the table, watching me. He spoke not of my lateness, but of my affect. He said the pastor watched me during worship. He said my body spoke a language I did not control. His voice dropped, becoming strangely intimate, a confession meant for the dark. Then came his touch. His hand, large and heavy, landed on my shoulder. It did not part or comfort. It slid, slowly, down my arm, a possessive, exploratory stroke that had nothing to do with fatherhood. The ice that shot through my veins was instant. My "Papa, please," was a gasp, a plea for the world to right itself. The reaction was volcanic. He snatched his hand back as if scalded, his face twisting from that strange, soft guilt into a mask of righteous fury. He pointed a trembling finger, his voice a whip. "See what you make me think." The blame was transferred in an instant, hot and searing, from his hand to my soul. I was sent to my room accused of standing in my own kitchen with intent. I sat on the floor, back against the door, and the tears that came were not for the touch, but for the terrible algebra of it. My existence plus his weakness equaled my sin. The sanctity of the church offered no sanctuary. Pastor Ben's study was a small, book-lined trap. He spoke of me as a vessel, of the weak young men in the congregation, of my figure as a stumbling block. His solution was private prayer, his voice a syrupy bomb. When his hand landed on my back, it carried the same weight of ownership as my father's. It was a touch that pretended to pray while it claimed. My body reacted before my mind could. I jolted up, the chair screeching and clattering behind me. I fled, the sound of that falling chair echoing the collapse of my trust. I was not fleeing a man, I was fleeing the institution T. When I dared to speak, to name the sin that was not mine, the judgment was swift and physical. My father's slap was a punctuation mark to end all argument. The sting on my cheek was nothing compared to the finality in his eyes. My mother's weeping from the sofa was a soundtrack of surrender. The words they heard, Jezebel, seductive spirit, were nails meant to crucify my truth to their narrative. In that moment, I was convicted. The sentence was a lifetime of hiding. The evidence was my own skin. For years, I served that sentence. I moved through the world as an apology, a walking provocation I had not uttered. Then, in the quiet rebellion of the internet, I found other testimonies. I found women with calves like continents, celebrated in art and song and strength. I saw words like ownership and reclamation. They glowed on the screen like forbidden scripture. With money from a secret job, I committed my first act of devotion. I bought a single dress. It was simple, but it was cut to fit, in a vibrant Ankara print that spoke of home without shame. I hid it under my mattress, a flat, colorful secret that felt more sacred than any hymn. The day I left for university, their final warnings followed me to the door, directions on how to remain a ghost in a new city. I nodded, wearing my uniform of concealment. But in the sterile silence of my dorm room, I performed my own ritual. I slipped the Ankara dress over my head. The fabric fell where it was meant to fall. It clung where it was meant to cling. I turned to the mirror. I did not see a temptation. I did not see a problem. I saw architecture. I saw the gentle slope of my grandmother's back, the resilient width of my mother's hips before doctrine had bent her spine. I saw a body built for carrying burdens, for carrying life, for carrying me through this world. It was strong. It was mine. And the tears that came then were the sweet, salty release of a long exile ending. The call from my mother years later was a thread from that old life. Her voice was strained with the familiar panic. A photograph from a friend's party. Too much back showing. Too much shape. People were talking. Pastor Ben was concerned. The old script was in her hands, and she began to read. "Mama," I said, my voice a calm, solid thing in my sunlit apartment. "Stop." The silence on the line was profound. Into it, I laid down my new law. I told her my body was not their shame to carry, not his sermon to preach. That the management of a man's temptation was his own spiritual work, not my physical responsibility. I said this body was the harvest of our lineage, and it was not a crime. The click of the disconnected call was not an ending, but a boundary firmly drawn. Now, I walk. I walk down sun-drenched streets, and my body moves with a rhythm that is entirely its own. My hips swing in a quiet, undeniable truth. I take up space. The sun feels different on your skin when you are no longer hiding from it. I catch my reflection in a shop window and I do not look away. I see a woman, oh. I give her a slow, sure nod. My body is my testament. It is fleshy and real and unerasable. It is a story of survival, written not in their ink of shame, but in the indelible language of bone and blood and resilient spirit. And from now on, the only prayer I will say over it is the one of thanks. If this story resonated with you, please let me know in the comments. Share your story. Your voice matters. Thank you for listening. If you want to support more stories like this, stories of truth and reclamation, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's next.